Welcome, welcome, everybody, to the Morning Update Show. I'm your co host, Trey Holiday. And you guys know I can't do this without my partner, Big O. What's up, Big O? Happy Tuesday, brother.
Yay, holiday. What's happening?
Hey,
How are
what's
you?
going on? I'm good. I'm good.
I'm doing good. You know what I'm saying? Considering looks like, the doom and gloom weather has returned here to the Emerald City, and it's gonna be a long winter.
Yeah, for sure, bro. The thunder and the lightning was waking me up throughout the night, man.
Man, it was thundering and lightning last night.
Yes, it was,
Oh wow.
man.
I finally got some sleep. I slept good. I didn't hear
Yeah.
nothing. Nothing at all.
You deserve it, bro.
Man, well, pretty interesting show today. It's just a bit of a short show as well because we have a production that we're doing right after this. But checking in on a few things across the city. We're going to be talking about. I talked to Justin Carter from Capitol Hill, Seattle, yesterday about your girl, Shelma Sawant, and the recall effort that's out there. The ACLU is suing the state of Washington over driving fines and penalties, keeping people from getting their driver's licenses, and a few other interesting stories here along the way. First, I want to jump into it though, is that it turns out that Seattle is now the second fastest growing city in America. And growth always impacts us. I mean, it impacts everybody, but this kind of growth that we've seen here, it impacts different communities in different ways. This clip right here is from King 5.
A new study is
Yeah.
out tonight. It names this city as one of the fastest growing in the country. That might not be a big surprise to a lot of you, but for home buyers, it is presenting some real challenges. King 5's Britt Moore spoke with a broker who says despite the pandemic, home prices are skyrocketing and a lot of people are eager to move to Seattle.
Many homebuyers are running into a problem. Sold signs. There just aren't enough homes to keep up with demand, and the pandemic is not slowing things down at all. In fact, realtors say people are still moving into the Seattle area for better jobs and to take advantage of the outdoors.
Is it surprising to hear that Seattle was named the second fastest growing large city in the country?
Not really for me. It's just a continuation of a trend that we've been seeing for the last number of years.
A new Wallet Hub study says people are flocking to Seattle for a number of reasons. A trend that's not new, just not what brokers like John Deely expect to see during the pandemic.
A lot of our tech workers are coming out of California, and of course, the housing is much more expensive there. And really, the quality of life here, there's so many things to do with all the outdoor activities. And
Governor Inslee loosened restrictions on the real estate industry just last week, and already buyers are lining up for open houses.
this is the first weekend that we've actually been able to put out open house signs also. So that brought in additional people.
Dilly says with the market being so competitive and people out of state trying to get in, it's up to the buyers to step it up.
Well, you really have to be ready with your A game. You have to have all of your financial matters in order. There's buyers that are removing contingencies.
Seattle isn't alone in this trend. Wallet Hub says Henderson, Nevada, and Atlanta are growing even through hard economic times, thanks to strong job and housing markets. Britt Moore, King 5 News.
All right, so everybody wants to move to Seattle, despite everything we've been through here in 2020. Seattle is clearly a hot market, and you already said buyers have to step it up. You know what that means? It's like you got to have that money ready.
Well, yeah, and then he was talking about, buyers are, lessening their contingency plans. It's such another competitive market, man. And once again, folks got to be super competitive going into it. You better strap up your boots and be ready for battle on these houses, man.
Yeah, I mean, houses are expensive here. You heard him talk about how expensive people are getting away from expensive houses in California. Okay. But this is an interesting story to follow because the more people that move here, clearly the more displacement that happens, the more rents rise and everything else. So, but it's also interesting because there's a big narrative. The last few years, Seattle is dying. Seattle's this. Seattle's horrible. It's anarchy, jurisdiction, and everything else. But people are clearly still moving here.
Absolutely. And it's important that people understand that that's why there's solutions on the ground. Let me just say here, I got to plug this because it really is connected to this issue. ACLT, Africatown Community Land Trust, has been working with Homestead Community Land Trust to bring affordable home ownership options back to the CD. And now we're going to be working on our own. So we're going to be having a information session for folks. Please log on to the website. Know that information session is coming. We just sent out a newsletter yesterday. So folks, join that session so you can learn about these new affordable home ownership opportunities that are coming right here to the Central District.
All right, moving along. Talk to my good bud, Justin Carter of the Capitol Hill Seattle.com. And he has been following up on the recall effort on Councilmember Sawant, whose district is right there in Capitol Hill, but also our home district, the Central District as well. And he gave an update as to where everything is at with the recall Sawant efforts.
Yeah, Shama is taking it to the next level. She faces a recall movement, a campaign against her, but that process is still in the courts. And the first process was the King County Superior Court judge deciding whether the basis of the recall could move forward, which was a decision that came earlier, and that judge agreed that it could. But Sawant's lawyers now have taken it to the next step, which is they've notified the courts that they plan to appeal this to the state Supreme Court. And they also asked the judge to reconsider his previous decision. That's something he just ruled on Friday, saying, nope, I've gone back through my decisions. Here's the legal basis for the four kind of allegations against Councilmember Sawant, and here's why I think that they all legally held up. Interestingly enough, the judge also cited quite a bit of media coverage around, especially like the one of the big allegations, which is that you might remember that Councilmember Sawant supposedly revealed the confidential location of the mayor's home address, and so the judge said, nope, these things should go up and go forward to the voters, and so now it's going to go to the Supreme Court, who will consider whether the recall can go forward and the campaign can continue.
Right, and now this recall Sawant campaign, I read an article. It might have been in on your site or a different one that said that it's a lot of support that is getting. They're trying to keep it at $25 to be able to keep the people who are donating to the campaign anonymous. There's donations coming in from like different parts of the state. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, they've already raised almost $160,000, often $25 at a time. To if your donation is of a certain level, you don't need to disclose your identity. You can make an anonymous donation to the fund, and so a lot of people have done that. I mean, it's a recall for someone who's a very hyper local position. It's District 3 here in Seattle. It will be up to the District 3 voters if this recall ends up going forward. But the process to raise money, that's a global event and an issue, and people across the country and maybe even people from around the world are putting money into this.
All right, so you're based right there in D3. What's the sentiment there on the ground? Is there like a lot of actual on-ground momentum for recalling Sawant?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of Capitol Hills. I mean, you have everything from the rich people over around Volunteer Park to the tech workers around, the Pike Pine Core to, some of the maybe older school kind of crunchier families that kind of how to describe this, even old school kind of Capitol Hill down towards more central district kind of neighborhoods. And so it's going to vary, but her core support area around kind of the Pike Pine core and the Broadway core, I mean, there's definitely a little bit of an erosion maybe there where, which is interesting because she just did so well in the election. But I think the summer has, galvanized some people's feelings, especially on her opposition side. Her opponents are probably more inspired than ever to push back against her because of the protests and the kind of sense of street disorder and those kinds of things that people keep talking about on the right. So you're starting to hear more kind of regular, maybe more moderate business types also talking about those things when it comes to District 3.
All right, Justin Carter there of the CapitolHillSeattle.com. And, like he said, that it's gaining some momentum, the recall Sawant effort. It's taking it to the Supreme Court. Mayor Durkin was successful in the Supreme Court. We got you there, Trey. No, we don't have Trey. We're going to have to bring Trey back. But Mayor Durkin was successful in the recall when she took the case to the Supreme Court. We'll see if Councilmember Sawant is also successful. But the big story is there's a lot of money that's pouring in, mostly $25 at a time, because it's an anonymous. You can remain anonymous with your donation if you donate $25 or less. Move on to the next story here. This is out of Portland, Oregon. Seattle is taking a kind of a different approach as far as defund and as far as services to be provided that are not necessarily 911 emergency services. So, for example, when you talk about mental health calls or calls that don't necessarily require an armed response, with Portland, what they're doing is they're trying to launch a street response program. And so instead of community-based organizations responding to people who might be in mental health crisis, it's going to be a function basically of the fire department there.
Well, in a time when some people are demanding changes to how we police, a program to help take on some 911 calls for those experiencing homelessness or a mental health crisis is now moving forward. Jacqueline Abad live tonight with an update on what they're calling the Portland Street Response. What's this all about, Jacqueline?
Well, Jeff, today Portland Fire posted 2 jobs for the Portland Street Response, one for a mental health provider and for a community health worker. Now, this pilot program is expected to start late January, early next year.
I'm going to start the conversation.
Tonight, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty put together a panel to talk about community safety and what it means to us.
It matters who shows up for 911 when somebody calls 911. It matters whether they have the skills and the resources to address whatever the current issue is.
We heard from different communities about their hopes.
There is a fair, safe, and equitable system.
Talked about what's being done in our neighborhoods today and how we are moving forward. In early 2021, a pilot for the Portland Street Response will take place in the Lentz neighborhood. It's a non-police response to calls for those who are homeless or dealing with behavioral or mental health crisis. It was delayed because of the pandemic, but Portland Fire is starting to hire to put a team together.
Portland Fire and Rescue has the infrastructure, and we're currently connected to the current 911 system. And really, with this goal of Portland Street Response, it's really to update the first responder system by providing that alternate, compassionate first response.
Back in June, Portland City Council voted to reallocate $4.8 million from Portland Police to the Portland Street Response so it can expand to 6 teams.
We're looking at it from a prevention. If we can really understand what the model or what the concern is and connect them to those resources.
If we look at community safety as a health issue, then we will invest dollars differently to make sure that we are investing in the right community supports that make community members safer and make us all healthier.
All right, so you see right there, this is a different approach to a similar problem where Portland, they're putting $4.8, almost $5 million that was in the police budget, and they're moving it over to fire. And so fire would basically be the first responders. This street response program would be the first responders to those who might be in a mental health crisis or situations that don't necessarily require an armed response. And so they're getting ready to start hiring people and everything else. Seattle has a pilot program, I think it's called Health One. It's very small compared to the overall program. But I was just pointing out the differences in approach, because here in Seattle, what it is people, I think like King County Equity Now, you probably tell me, is advocating for those funds to go into community organizations, and community organizations be the first responders. In Portland, they're allocating those funds to the fire department, and the fire department would be the first responders.
Well, it's a great way to be thinking about it. Again, I think what we're going to be seeing in the coming times, is a lot of innovation towards, hey, how do we do things differently? How do we create a different system? Because this system that we've been working with has been working in a way that creates these disparities. So how do we do something different? It's really encouraging to see that, our sister city down there, Portland, our neighbor city in the Pacific Northwest is doing an innovative approach. It really does inspire me. And I think we can learn a little bit from this. What we're seeing here on our side is a lot of this is talking about, hey, we can do things in community where we can have a different phone number that is manned 24/7, that is really about community response. So I love just seeing these innovative approaches. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on here to the national stories here. Over 10 million people have now early voted across America. And down south, it's a lot of long lines, especially in Atlanta.
More than 10 million Americans have already voted. Take a look at these lines in Georgia yesterday, the first early voting day there. It's one of 43 states where that's an option. Many voters faced massive wait times, but they were determined to cast their ballots anyway. Mark Strassman is at Georgia's largest polling place, State Farm Arena in Atlanta. Mark, what's expected there today?
Well, good morning, Anthony. I mean, normally it's the Atlanta Hawks who play here inside State Farm Arena. But as you mentioned, now it's the single largest early voting option in the entire state of Georgia. Behind me, you can see some of the 302 voting machines that are scattered throughout the arena. It's all part of the push to accommodate Georgia's record early turnout.
With so much on the line, voters stood in line for hours. The first day, Georgians could.
But this line is long.
So long, it took a chopper to see all those waiting in one metro Atlanta county. At Georgia's largest polling place, a 3-hour line stretched through Atlanta's NBA arena. But 80-year-old Linda Williams waited.
They only have 5 machines to accommodate 1,000 people.
After the same glitches that caused chaos in Georgia's June primary briefly crashed computers, more machines came online. But so did more voters.
I wasn't frustrated, I didn't get anxious, and I committed to the process.
I didn't like it, but I didn't mind it. I made a lot of friends.
And made history. 10 million Americans have already voted, the most ever this early.
Just to get it over with and out of the way.
Despite a deadly pandemic, some Americans aren't willing just to mail it in. CBS News election law expert David Becker.
People are excited to vote. Sometimes people get excited. They want to go on the first day. They want to be part of history.
Today, at least 19 states already offer in-person voting, with 8 more by week's end and 5 more on Monday.
All right, you hear a lot of people are excited to cast their vote. It's a lot of energy going into the election. And man, you see those lines down there, 3-4 hours waiting in line.
Man, you know what? One of the things that I was thinking while watching this was, honestly, I'm so grateful to be in Washington State, where we have such a strong understanding of our mail-in voting system. We've been doing it for so long. We have a really great system in place. And I've only voted by mail. As a young person turning 18, going away to college, you get that ballot. I was like, look, I need to mail it in. You know what I mean? I'm trying to vote for my first time. So that's the way that I've done it. It's the way I've known to do it. I'm thankful that we have that as an option. And honestly, I'm also thankful. And once again, you're giving me stories that are inspiring me this morning, brother, because I'm inspired that people are taking their liberty and they are doing it early. I love it.
Yeah, it's a lot of bamboozling going on too. I was just down there in Texas and Houston, biggest city in America, Harris County, massive population there. I think 3-4 million people, and they're only given one drop-off box for absentee votes for the whole county. The governor down there said because of COVID, they've reduced the number of boxes. So just think in Seattle, like how many boxes just in Seattle alone, let alone King County or state of Washington. but just in Seattle alone, for all of Harris County, they want to use one box. Here's another story here out of Southern California, the national news front. We talk about voting bamboozling. There's a church here who put basically a fake ballot box out front.
There is a voting controversy cropping up in Southern California after a fake ballot box was called out by county officials.
Local voters in the area are now concerned about that fake ballot box and wondering what happens to the ballots already dropped inside of it. Lori Perez has more.
It was insane. I can't imagine in what world you would think that that would be acceptable.
Shannon Katie first spotted the drop box on the pastor of Freedom Way Baptist Church's own Facebook page. You see a gray metal container with a taped sign which says official ballot drop box, and the pastor, Jerry Cook, wrote underneath, "Our church has a voting drop box in front of our complex. If you are voting early, drop your ballot on by." Katie and others alerted the LA County Registrar's Office, which responded on social media saying this is not an official vote by mail drop box and does not comply with state regulations for drop boxes. The Registrar's Office told me tonight they're trying to reach Pastor Cook and working with council to issue a cease and desist letter. Other posts on the church's website show it hosting a forum for Republican local candidates and criticizing the Black Lives Matter movement. With that in mind, some locals are frankly suspicious of what the church's intentions were with the box.
If you believe in your candidate, there's no reason to try to fudge with the election at all. It's an attack on democracy. It's not okay, and it pissed me off.
I mean, it was up for like 4 days before I even saw it, before it started to kind of gain traction. So I'm really worried that someone put their ballot in there and that he just saw it was for a certain candidate or saw whatever and just tore it up and throw it away.
Yeah, like I said, we're kind of used to our voting process here in Seattle and King County, in the state of Washington, but it's a lot of funny business going on across the country, all the way from governors and county elections boards setting all kinds of rules to even things like this.
Wow. To be honest, it's unfortunate to see, because I think that so many people that are out there, as Americans right now, really want to make sure that our civil liberties are protected. And voting is one of them. We have that right to vote. And this is not something that should be toyed with in any way. I think someone like a pastor abusing any form of power he believes he has in this way is really a form of injustice.
Well, we got to keep it real. This is like, voter suppression, one way or another, has always been part of our history of our country. It's just our history. It is what it is. Yeah, I mean, early on, that's even the way that it's set up. How certain positions are elected. And the whole process. I'm going to have a whole discusussion about it because, every group of marginalized people throughout our history has faced suppression.
Absolutely.
I think actually we're gonna have a real good discussion on that. Let me move forward though. The ACLU sues over Washington suspending licenses of people who can't pay traffic fines. And basically what the ACLU is saying is that someone gets a traffic fine, they can't afford to pay it. Maybe they're out of work, broke, COVID, whatever it might be. And then they get their license suspended. And the ACLU is saying is that basically people are getting penalized twice. And so they're suing the state of Washington over the suspension of driver's license over unpaid fees or tickets.
You know what? I could have did a tap dance when I read this one. Because let me tell you that there's so much layers of bureaucracy and this and that and penalties and fines and so many things that we have to deal with as people. So I'm happy that the ACLU is taking this on straight up because it is so true. It creates more disparities. And once again, when we have things that are revolved around, hey, you need to pay this or pay that, it's always going to boil down to people who can't pay and them being the ones that are like left in the lurch. So I'm glad that they're taking this case on.
Yeah, we'll definitely follow this one up. We're going to take a short break right now. And then when we come back, we're going to dive into something that I saw in the Emerald and discuss a little bit more about Seattle's history. You are watching the Morning Update Show.
My parents coming over here as refugees meant that they didn't really have anything when they came to America. Having reliable healthcare and having a reliable doctor was really important. Cộng đồng của tôi, trạm y tế của tôi.
我的社区，我的诊所。Mi comunidad, mi clínica.
بلشدة هي بقارها.
My community, my clinic.
We're the Yard Bros. I'm Taco.
I'm Tia.
And this is our love story.
So we've been together for 14 years and married for 12.
So we met at a choir rehearsal.
No.
No. Which way?
We met at church.
Oh, you talking about the very first?
The very first interaction.
When you were shady. Okay.
I was not shady.
And I was like, will
I
you?
remember that.
And then it cuts off. And then I was like, marry me. And then I feel the bars.
But it stopped being about each other. And so COVID helped us to return to, wow.
We matter. You and I matter.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to our love story.
We're the Yard Bros.
And vote Black Love.
All right, welcome back. Reminder, Vote Black Love 2020 premieres Sunday at 7 p.m. Tia and Taco, Yard Bro, and man, we're excited about it. And if you want to nominate a couple, you can actually go to whereweconverge.com/vote Black Love.
Oh, I love it. I love Black Love.
There it is. Let's see. I got another story here. Let's see. King County Sheriff. Yeah, so this is a big one here. Is they're gonna vote, and you can find this more about this on the Emerald, but the voters are going to decide the future of the sheriff in King County. And, right now the sheriff is an elected position, and I believe what they want to do is make the sheriff an appointed position. And so there's a few differing thoughts on that. I know Councilmember Gurmai is one of the people who's really pushing for the sheriff to be an appointed position. Of course, there's a lot of people who want the sheriff to be an elected position. Any thoughts on that, Trina?
This is another thing for us to, mull over as citizens right here. I mean, it's important because we see how the power of the sheriff's office, we see how it can be wielded. And so this is a tough call. I would like to do more research personally to understand some of the history behind it. I think I learned most from understanding how things play out over time. So, have we ever had an appointed type of sheriff? If this is something totally new? Are we going back to something that worked before? So understanding those parameters for me are going to be really important. And I hope so for the rest of the people out here in Seattle.
Right. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think that it's actually gone back and forth on this. But, for me around this issue, I'm big on accountability. And the thing is, if you vote a sheriff in, you can vote a sheriff out. And, everybody, the King County Council right now, there's a lot of different communities that feel very cozy with King County Council. And so they're like, hey, yeah, let the council appoint the sheriff. But man, what if all these people that everybody's cozy with gets voted out the next election? You know what I'm saying? And then, so it's difficult because voting for the sheriff, in my opinion, you can do a recall, you could do whatever you want. But and they're accountable to the voter. I know that there's a lot of arguments on the other side of this issue as well. But it keeps people accountable. For example, the police chief is appointed in Seattle, right? And so that's why we really don't know, who gave the order to evacuate the East Precinct. But if the chief was elected, if it was an elected position, the buck would literally stops there. And it's like, hey, the voter needs answers. So there's arguments on both sides of this. We want to follow it up. We'll talk to Councilmember Gurmai Zahalai more about this. I know he's pushing for the sheriff to be an appointed position, and, we'll discuss it more.
Yeah, it'd be great to hear his position a little bit more so I can be more educated. That's what this is all about. I'm all about educating myself at this point. Bro, we need to learn.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the best thing is right now people are so informed, or they're wanting to be informed, they're wanting to, be a part of the system, they're wanting to understand what's going on. So, that's we want to keep that going for them.
Yeah.
This was out of the Emerald, and this is an opinion by Alicia Ramirez, but it's segregated Seattle: how our racist and exclusionary past has shaped the present. And it's some real important points that were brought up in this opinion here, and I thought that I would just point a few out, because some of the things that happen here in Seattle is that, I mean, we just kind of like whitewash history, and the history is just the history. Like, you got to embrace it. And that's one thing that's kind of different than Seattle, than a lot of cities that you go down south, is like they can't run from the history and make it be something that it's not. Like, Selma can't run from, Bloody Sunday, the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It's just part of their history, and it is, and people embrace it and they move forward. But what happens, I think, here in Seattle is that we're constantly on this bandwagon here for a long time, saying that this is the bastion of liberalism, and this is, racism doesn't live here, and it never has, and all these kinds of things, everything else. And what Ramirez points out in this piece here in the South Seattle Emerald is something that people like me and you have known for a long time. It's about, like, one of the things is housing covenants. See, Seattle, it wasn't until the 60s, maybe I'll talk about it here for a few minutes. Seattle, early on, they put in housing covenants, and on the deeds, some people still have old original deeds, and on the deeds on the home, it said that black people couldn't live there. I mean, it wasn't even black, it was especially black people. It was a lot of other people too. They was like, nah, you know what I'm saying? Basically non-white, that you couldn't live there. And there was like a Supreme Court ruling, when was it, in the late 1920s, I think it was 1926, that upheld that as being legal. And so basically, black people were literally redlined in to the Central District, which was, at the time, there was already a black population there. It was considered undesirable by other real estate developers and everything else. And that persisted all the way until the 1960s. But I also wanted to point out to people who, it's a lot of people who are just new to Seattle, and they might have, drunk the Kool-Aid. Seattle's always been this, whatever, this place. This is the Seattle Times, 1930. And this place right here, this is now what we call Lake City. Back then they called it on Bothell Highway at the city limits. This was the Coon Chicken Inn. The Coon Chicken Inn, and there's Sambo right there. He's the
mascot.
Yeah, basically. And I mean, and look at it. And this is the Seattle Times. It's 90 years ago. So, if you happen to be a black person here, read the Times. This is what you open up to. This looks like a front page right here. And they gave them the whole front page. This is a big investment here. Here's the ad. But look at this. Look to the left here. This is the bank. Davidson Bank. Congratulations. Coon Chicken Inn. The sign company. Hey, Coon Chicken Inn. We made your sign. The lumber company. Nilson Lumber. They're getting congratulations from everywhere. And so basically, Coon Chicken Inn opened in Seattle in 1930. It was this guy, Max and Lester Graham, who was from Salt Lake City, who opened up a few of these franchises across the West. And the whole thing was just this. It was, it was making a mockery of basically black people. And if you look here, one of the most surprising, I'm trying to be a little funny here, but one of the most surprising things is in the top right corner. It says, Utah folks are the champions of fried chicken. So we already know well for that. But this is an ad in the Seattle Times. And so, I mean, it's just a big advertorial. They got their whole big ad here, and everything's about, man, Coon Chicken. Ask anyone who came from the South. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they got like a DoorDash service back then. It was like call, telephone will bring chicken to your home. So this is the kind of things that people saw here in Seattle in the 1930s, right? And so when people sit and they say that, oh, well, you know, Seattle's always been this, Seattle's always been that, and everything else. It's like, that's not necessarily the case. And I think that when we talk about our history here in this city, too many people, they get offended as opposed to just being like, you know, I mean, our history is what it is and we should learn it. And this is something else right here. This is the University of Washington. If you actually go and search University of Washington, Coon Chicken Inn, they give a whole history over here of not only this Coon Chicken Inn that was there in North Seattle, but you know, it's a lot of the memorabilia that actually sits in the Shoreline Historical Museum. But like, man, this was a big deal. You know, they even had matches, matchboxes, and this talks about, you know, housing covenants and some of everything else. So, you know, when especially people who are new here and they're like, oh man, what are these black people talking about? I mean, there's example after example after example. So that was the 1930s, right? And so anyways, back to the housing covenant, wanted to set the scene of what people was like really going through over here. So then you get to the 1960s, these housing covenants are everywhere. Black people were redlined in, and it was a 10-year fight to lift the housing covenants. And actually, the Seattle office of the Human Rights Commission was founded during this fight for what was called an open housing ordinance. And people were going downtown. They used to do sit-ins at the mayor's office and here in Seattle in the 1960s. And in 1964, they drafted legislation for open housing, basically being like, man, you got to get rid of these covenants. Seattle voters voted it down. You know what I'm saying? Seattle voters in 1964 came to a consensus that housing covenants and keeping black people redlined in was all good. It wasn't until 1968, three weeks after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., that this housing ordinance passed and some of everything else. So Seattle, it's like, man, our history just is what it is. And you shouldn't go to history, make this person feel bad, make that person feel great. It's just our history, and we have to be able to understand it, and we have to embrace it, and really talking about the actual facts of what occurred here is real. You know, places like West Seattle, Magnolia, Queen Anne, they had sundown laws. So like if you was black, you had to leave those areas at the end of the work day, because basically most black people were over there. They were domestic workers. So if you were in West Seattle, Queen Anne, Magnolia at sundown, I mean, that was basically grounds for arrest.
Wow. I mean, you know what? This history is exactly what we have to learn from. Oh, and I think it's super important that we're highlighting it right now because, you know, we just talked about Seattle being the second fastest growing city in America. When we see that so many people now want to flock to this city, I think that what a lot of the officials do is they are building for those newcomers, right? And sometimes, and what we've seen in this tech industry is that they didn't think about, hey, how do we build our people up that are already here to be a part of this booming economy? How do we do that? And when we talk about the history, we also can't forget about weed and seed, which then became a national policy. It was piloted right here, you know, and centrally located, really in the Central District and South End, where you had so many people that were part of police force just looking at groups of young men and taking photos. Now that's a gang. That's a gang. Now they have all of this data to sit there and say, oh, let's put these people together and these guys are over here conspiring. There was a lot of work done in terms of racist practices that really got us to where we are today. So I'm glad that you're uplifting this history because we have to learn from it. Oh,
yeah. And, you know, when we can have honest conversations just about what occurred, Seattle got an amazing history as well, like lots of positive things too. But it's like, man, we can't run from history. And Seattle is one of the cities that's never reconciled to history. Even when we hear politicians talk, they talk about America, what America has done, this and that. Man, that's fine. Let's just talk about Seattle. Let's talk about, you know, our history here. Because the only way that we can really build a better future is we really understand the past. And so disregarding our journey to this point and trying to make policy for the future without understanding these things that are here You know what I'm saying? It's crazy all together. And
Really
so this
is.
is why it's important that we continue to talk about our historical journey in this city and bring a lot of things to light. Like I said, people who grew up here, you know a lot of these stories. You heard, you know what I'm saying, our elders talk about how the Coon Chicken Inn used to be here and things like that. But it's a lot of people who are new to our city. We see that it's second fastest growing city in America. And for people to really understand what's going on here, you have to understand these dynamics, a lot of them that go back well over 100 years.
Absolutely. And I think that there are several different things that folks can really learn from. I mean, look at House Bill 1918. We've talked about it many times right here on this platform that really was saying, look, we recognize that these were part of the practices that we had in place. We recognize how it created these large disparities and it oppressed a large part of the Black population here in Seattle. House Bill 1918 lays a lot of this out. So if folks are really, confused, concerned, they want to get educated, they want to learn, that's a great document to just cycle through and actually look at all of the ways that racial practices have created almost what she was describing in that article, this kind of segregated Seattle. And I've been dealing with it because I've been here my whole life and traveled throughout, but it's been something that has persisted in the Black community for sure.
Well, let's be clear. I mean, Seattle was a very segregated city. That's why there was redlining. That's why there was housing covenants. That's why it was like, you couldn't go downtown after dark. You couldn't go. It was a big deal if a Black musician could play even in a nightclub in downtown Seattle. This was a very segregated city. And definitely you weren't going north. You weren't crossing the Ship Canal. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it is what it is. Also during that time span there, soon after this open housing ordinance was passed, 9 months later, Edwin T. Pratt was assassinated up there in Shoreline when he tried to move him and his family, the very first Black people to move into Shoreline. Irene Torres made a comment here. I'd love to see a Seattle Black History page or group. Guess what? It's already there. It's the Black Heritage Society of Washington State. You can find them on Facebook, Black Heritage Society of Washington State, and also on their website. Trey Holiday, we got an early day today because we got to get out of here and get to some production in the field. We are back tomorrow, 11 a.m. I think we got a very big interview tomorrow. So I'm trying to work it out right now. We'll see if we can get on here. Any last words before we bounce?
You know what? Just excited for this week. We have a couple of events I want to mention really quickly. We do have a lunch and learn for William Gross Center. If folks are wanting to understand how we're moving with Fire Station 6 and what those plans are looking like, you guys can find that information on ACLT's Facebook page. I'll make sure it's up there because that call is tomorrow. And then this Saturday is going to be that community engagement home ownership session. So if you want to understand about some affordable home ownership opportunities, ACLT is going to be also hosting that call on Saturday. So excited to have those events coming up this week for the folks.
All right. I'm already standing. It looks like you are too.
No, me. Yes, sir.
Okay. Until tomorrow at 11 a.m. Peace.
Peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing